Hello and welcome to The Print. It's not every day that you have a former Indian diplomat that has been posted to a country as important and relevant as Pakistan, and more so, being the first Indian woman diplomat to be posted to Islamabad. But today we have with us today Ruchi Ghanashyam. Ma'am, thank you so much for joining us. And of course, to speak about this beautifully written memoir about your time as the first Indian woman diplomat in Islamabad from 97 to 2000.
Thank you so much, Pia. It's a great pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
So, of course, ma'am has led a illustrious and successful diplomatic career spanning 30 years. She has also served in UK and Ghana as India's ambassador. And while serving in Islamabad, you were the political counselor. And in one incident, in fact, during the Kargil war, you were the acting high commissioner and even summoned at the time, if I recall.
Yes.
We will be covering all that and more. But just to remind you why this is such an important book. Ambassador Ghanashyam was serving at a very important time, 97 to 2000, when you had a lot of key events that happened. You had the Kargil War, you had Vajpayee's landmark visit to Lahore, you had the hijacking of the Kandahar flight, which also exposed IC-814, that also exposed the close links between the Pakistan ISI and the Taliban, which of course was well known in the neighborhood, the Musharraf coup as well. So you've seen a lot, and we're lucky to sit here with you today to delve into it. So first question, how difficult was it to write a book given the sensitive relations between India and Pakistan?
Pia, I thought that it would be not a very difficult book to write because there are so many obvious things that you pick on. Because it was such an eventful time and so many important things happened that I thought it would be easy to just go from one to the other, one development to the other, and to finish the book. But it didn't pan out that easily as it did in my imagination. So I wrote actually quite a lot of it. I think about 5 or 6 or 5.5 or 6 chapters, and I realized that I didn't know how to organize it. It was all like a jumble. So I I gave it up actually. I thought that it's too much because there's so many different flavors to it. And how do you try to, like there's something which is not so nice, something which is unpleasant. On the other hand, you have good experiences, and if you write about one, then it seems as if you're being uh, kind of not very fair to the other perspective. So it was difficult, and it took me quite some time actually to finish writing it.
And did everything make it to the last version of the book?
No, I think I have discarded about almost as much as I have retained.
Okay.
Because I didn't want this book to be like a very heavy reading. I wanted it to be a book that anybody who is mildly interested in other
Foreign
countries or
affairs.
foreign affairs, they should also find it possible to read it. I didn't want to make it a very scholarly treatise. In any case, I think it's been written a lot, India Pakistan bilateral
Yes.
relations, or so there are a lot of books available. And but that was not the reason why I chose to write it like this, but it was the fact that I wanted to respond to the different queries that people always asked of us. And that is how it was. The motivation was to make it very readable. So when there was too much of background, or if it was like stretched too much, then I could see myself that it's kind of little bit digressing, or you know looking more like flab. And so I very ruthlessly cut out portions, which I discarded, but I kept them on my computer. so that if I wanted to get it back, I could. But eventually, I realized that they are all like off the page and off my memory.
Well, we'll have to get you back to extract more of those versions you have on your computer. But at least from what I could say as an MEA correspondent, it was so refreshing to read a book essentially about India Pakistan relations from the perspective of a woman diplomat. But also the nitty gritties of how Pakistan ISI agents used to constantly surveil you, and once in a while you'd ask them for directions if you were lost,
Yes.
or that you were shopping in the Pakistan Naval Colony Market, even though Indian diplomats, are not allowed in
True.
defense forces areas. So it is refreshing, a breath of air, fresh air, and definitely accessible to people who don't even cover foreign affairs or the general public. So I'm sure this book will definitely be received in that way. Coming back to some specific moments in the book, the Kargil War, during that, of course, there was an incident of our Indian soldiers being tortured by Pakistani forces. And during that time, you were actually summoned by the Pakistan Foreign Office.
Yes.
You mentioned briefly in the book, but could you walk us through the experience and the feeling of being in that room?
Well, right from the beginning of my of our stay in Islamabad, we had been I had been going with the High Commissioner or the Deputy High Commissioner to cover meetings when they were summoned to the Foreign Office. But when I got summoned, it was just a matter of chance that the High Commissioner was away in India, and the Deputy High Commissioner had not yet arrived because there was some personal emergency or some personal matters that something was there because of which he had not yet taken charge in Islamabad. The previous Deputy High Commissioner had proceeded some time back to his next posting, and I was Councillor Political, but on that one particular day or 2 days, I think I was acting High Commissioner when they called me. And to start with, I was apprehensive and little nervous about it, because I had not yet ever gone and spoken on my own. I had always been going as a note taker. So, but then I had to remind myself that I had attended many of these, and I had been groomed by my seniors, and everybody will have uh, the time when it is the first time.
Right.
So, well, that was the first time for me. It so happened that it was a very difficult time, but uh, that was the first time. So I realized that I should put my best foot forward. So the first thing I did was to call the High Commissioner who was in India. I discussed with him, and I'm glad I did, because immediately he was able to figure out, and you know, yeah, and very experienced High Commissioner, and I'm really glad that I had the opportunity to to work under his guidance. There are so many occasions when his experience was invaluable to us, and with his the bolstering, I went to the Foreign Office, and then of course the rest I have described in the book.
Right. And I mean, there are a lot of instances in this book where you talk to your friends in Pakistan. Of course, I'm sure the names have been changed for safety purposes, of course, but there's one friend of yours called Fatima.
Yes.
And one of the last conversations you had with her was about Benazir Bhutto.
Yes.
Where she talked about sort of her sympathy for Benazir Bhutto, who was not only the first woman prime minister of Pakistan, but she also had to face the behemoth that was the Pakistan military, who actively tried to remove her towards the end of her tenure. And would you say that you share some of Fatima's sympathy on that issue with not just Benazir Bhutto, but a lot of the political leaders that we've seen in Pakistan, who have had to also had to at times go up against the Pakistan military, or at least negotiate with them? We've seen what's happened with Imran Khan.
Yeah.
What's your view on that?
Yes, I do appreciate that politicians in Pakistan don't have it very easy. Uh, Democracy has been, as I've tried to bring out in the book, like from 1958 onwards, this has started. The military taking over, and for till I mean, almost 50% of the independence, now a little bit less than 50%, has been direct rule by the military. But other times, they may not themselves be in power, but they are constantly watching over the elected government. So it's not very easy. And then, as this Mehran Gate and these other cases have come out, and they are written about in the press now openly. Cases have happened, and they show what an uphill task it is for democracy in Pakistan. And living in Pakistan, I really learned to appreciate India and our own country much, much more, because in India the military is completely apolitical, and we can joke about it. Actually, it is so much that we take for granted, that we have a democracy, that we have elections, that we have free and fair elections, that governments change. Today somebody is very powerful, and tomorrow they are, out of power. It's the people of India who are the most powerful entity in our country. And that is something I really learned to appreciate while I was in Pakistan.
Right, because you also point out in the book that the Pakistan military has its tentacles in the economy. It
Yes.
owns 12% of the land in
Yes.
Pakistan.
Yes.
So when you have, as I mentioned, a behemoth like that,
Yes.
up against political leaders, elected political leaders,
Yes.
that is difficult.
Yes.
And I found those conversations you had with your Pakistani friends in the book bring out the sort of immersive experience that only a diplomat could experience, I suppose. But coming back to your perspective as a woman in Islamabad, raising a young family.
Yes.
Your husband also a diplomat who played a key role also during the hijacking of flight IC-814.
Yes.
And was posted to Kandahar. What would you say that you took a lot of risks as being the first Indian woman in Islamabad as a diplomat, of course?
Is it a risk? I don't know. Perhaps not, because I suppose if one has to count risks, I think the risk starts the moment you step out of your house. So there is a risk involved in everything, and being the first woman, sometimes, in fact, when I was posted, I was not even aware that no other woman had been posted to Islamabad until then. So
one had been posted to Karachi.
There had been a woman who had served in Karachi, but in Islamabad, I realized that much later. And the risk factor perhaps is not so much, because there is always somebody who is following you. So though he's not there for my safety or for the safety of the diplomat, but if the safety is threatened, then they will come into play. So that's why, in fact, initially I did not bother putting a lock on the gate, taking the usual precautions that one normally takes. And one day I was questioned about it by the colleague who was in charge of the security of the mission, because he had taken a round and he found that we had not put the lights on the gate. They were not switched on, and our gate was not locked. Anybody could have entered. And so he said, "Why are you not locking your gate?" And my answer to him was that, if somebody wants to come in, how can I stop them? It is not my country. So the day they want to come inside, nothing is going to stop them.
Hmm.
But then he said, no, but there can be miscreants or robbers or thieves or anybody, so you should follow the precautions. And then, of course, at the end, what happens, we don't know. So it's, I think, how you see it. I mean, a glass half empty or half full.
But surely there were moments, for example, after the 1998 nuclear tests,
Yes.
and Pakistan responded with their own tests. There was a tense feeling in Islamabad
Yes.
and Pakistan against Indians, Indian origin spouses of, let's say, Pakistani men.
Yes.
And you even noted how one of your Indian diplomatic officers was assaulted, brutally
That's
assaulted
true.
outside his residence
Yes.
by
Yes.
a stranger.
By somebody who was guarding the house, one of the neighboring houses. And this officer was going on his morning walk when he was suddenly, from nowhere he was attacked. And he had fractures and stitches, and he was in hospital for quite a few days. And then when he came back, actually, one night I got a panicky call from his wife, because they had heard footsteps. And so the person had apparently, maybe it's the same person who came back, but then we decided to move him and find him very, at the earliest opportunity, we found him another place to move to. But this is the paradox, or the amazing thing about uh, Islamabad, or living there, that on the one hand you experience uh, the most extreme kind of negativity, and on the other hand there are people out of the blue, strangers, who will be kind to you, which is also what I have,
The love-hate relationship you talk
the
about.
love-hate relationship. That's it's what is it? It's very difficult to put a finger on.
You said a former foreign secretary once told your husband relations between India and Pakistan will never be good, bad. Can
They
be
can
good
be
or
good.
bad, but never normal.
That's right.
So,
That's right. That is it. There are periods when it is very good. There are periods when it is very bad, and the same in a different manner they apply to your relations with the people. There are some very good experiences. There are some which are not that good. So it's like bittersweet, or how do you want? I mean, there are different ways to try and explain it, but really speaking, there's not a way to put a finger on it.
Musharraf's coup, I wanted to briefly speak about that. Were the writings on the wall?
Yes, it's been it was kind of in the air for building up for a long time. In
For
fact,
months, you say in the
yes, it
book.
was. In fact, I remember I asked one of my counterparts from another country, and I think we were having lunch at the time, and his analysis was really perfect, and I have never forgotten his words. And he said somebody has to take the rap. It was a big deal, big loss for Pakistan. It's a big defeat for Pakistan. So somebody will have to pay the price for it. So that was the tussle, and I think it's a New York Times report, which the way they described it, I found it so colorful that for months that the army chief and the prime minister, they were like two scorpions in a bottle. And the image you can imagine, I mean, like how they would have been trying to, measure,
Strike at one
yes,
another.
strike or measure each other up. Or I don't know what two scorpions do when they actually attack each other. But the image really helps you to visualize what the situation must have been in the build up to the coup.
And as far as the hijacking of the Kandahar flight, you go into it quite in detail. In fact, there's a guest chapter by your husband.
That's right.
Who played a key role during that time. But what I wanted to ask you was more of a topical peg, because I myself cover Afghan relations, India-Afghan relations, as well as the Afghan mission here in Delhi quite a bit. Back then, that incident, the hijacking, very much showed just how close the Taliban and the Pakistan ISI are, and one almost born out of the other. And in fact, this year it will mark the 25th anniversary of the hijacking of IC-814.
That's right.
What is your take of India's current engagement with the Taliban, especially at a time when the Taliban in Pakistan are on rocky ground?
Yes, that's a very interesting question. And if you look at it during the time that we were there, I mean, we used to cover developments in Afghanistan. The neighboring countries were reporting from whatever they would be able to see from where they were sitting. So at that time, there was no relationship with the Taliban. But today, it's, I think the important perspective and the important thing to remember is that India has extremely good relations with Afghanistan and the people of Afghanistan. And that is a fundamental which is not change. That does not change just because there is X or Y regime or government in power. So, in a way, if you were to have at least some way of continuing that, we are greatly invested. We have done so many projects during the last several years that there should be some way to at least keep the momentum going. And it's also very important that while ISI may have relations with the Taliban, uh, the people of Pakistan, people of Afghanistan are not necessarily of the same view. In fact, I remember meeting an Afghan in Pakistan. He was working in one of the aid agencies, UN aid agencies, their office, and not in a very high position. In fact, not at all in a high position. But I mean, one thing he said, I remember now that you have asked, and he said Pakistan has made several million enemies in Afghanistan by imposing this kind of a regime and making the people to suffer so much that so many of them have become refugees, in fact. So, so it's not like if ISI has got links with the Taliban, that the whole of Afghanistan is beholden to ISI. Not at all. So governments and regimes, they will come and go, but eventually, if we do have a close link with the people of Afghanistan, and we do have a close link with that country. So I mean, whether we should have links or what kind of links, that's for the government to decide. And I'm not a policymaker anymore, but I can see this perspective also. When I think when they would be making a decision, they would weigh these factors as well.
And coming back to how you mentioned about how the Afghan people are not beholden to ISI, it was actually last year that Pakistan expelled about 1 million Afghan refugees, and that created a lot of furor in major cities, Kabul, Mazar-e-Sharif, several others. I think that is the end of my questions, and I hope we've covered at least the surface, because there's so much that you have gone into in this book and so many key events. In fact, also, I would be curious to ask you about your experience sort of being behind the scenes of Vajpayee's visit to Lahore. And the bus service and having all these Bollywood celebrities on board. What do you remember the most about those few days?
Well, those few days were so exciting. I was in charge of the media arrangements for the media, and we had this entire hotel which we had booked, and thankfully we booked because all hotels were chock-a-block full. There was so much media interest in the visit, and even that one hotel, we ran short of accommodation. There was a lot of interest in that visit. It was really a time when you thought that peace between India and Pakistan was just round the corner. till, of course, there was Kargil.
Kargil,
Yes.
just a few months later.
Yes. Yes.
Well, Ambassador Ghanashyam, thank you so much for taking the time out to speak to The Print about this beautiful memoir that you've put together.
Thank you.
And I hope to get you back to get some more excerpts that you've saved on your computer.